Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Sego, Skonawiasta Yungyats. My name is Krystal Brant, and I stand as a Mohawk woman who belongs to the Bear Clan. I'm also the Vice President of the Ontario Native Women's Association, the oldest and largest Indigenous women's organization in Canada. I'm honored to be here, amplifying the collective voices of over 30 Indigenous women's organizations and our Indigenous youth members. To ensure our leadership and our futures, we recommend your collective efforts to urge states and United Nations entities to take the following actions. Enhance financing for Indigenous women's organizations. Implement UNDRIP and CEDAW following the guidance of CEDAW General Recommendation 39. Ensure dedicated space and mechanisms for Indigenous women and youth's voices in the United Nations systems. I will now go into further detail for each. Firstly, we urge states to provide core, sustainable, and multi-year financing to Indigenous women's organizations and ensure Indigenous women's participation in UN forums. We are concerned with the serious liquidity crisis impacting UN bodies and jeopardizing the mandates and our human rights. We ask that you urge states to increase their allocations to the UN Voluntary Fund and to ensure key entities like the expert mechanism and the permanent forum have the financing they need to fulfill their mandates. Secondly, we urge states to implement critical mechanisms to uphold Indigenous women's rights, specifically UNDRIP and CEDAW, guided by General Recommendation 39. Treaty obligations and UNDRIP legislation and action plans in some states are not leading to actual changes in the daily lives of Indigenous peoples. We need action and accountability to keep Indigenous women safe. Despite Canada's statement that they are committed to the truth and reconciliation, only 2 of the 231 national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls calls for justice, and only 13 of the 94 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action have been implemented. Canada's inaction in response to the ongoing missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls crisis is a form of systemic and structural violence against Indigenous women. As Jennifer Moore-Rattray eloquently stated in her recent report to the Canadian government, striking committees does not constitute action. Continuous consultation does not constitute action. Words filled with good intentions do not constitute action. Thirdly, we urge UN entities and states to provide dedicated space and mechanisms for Indigenous women's voices in the United Nations systems. We echo the Special Rapporteur's previous recommendation that particular attention should be paid to increasing the participation of Indigenous women-led organizations and associations. We further ask UN members of the UN Voluntary Fund to prioritize Indigenous women and girls to increase our participation in UN spaces. It is our inherent right as land defenders, water carriers, and life givers to speak on our own behalf and represent ourselves, our families, and our future generations. Indigenous women hold the solutions to the issues we face. We must be given the tools, resources, and protections to do so. Nyawe.